In the country, north focal piece of New Shirt, there is a 3-section cave framework with a checkered history named Slanted Swamp Cave. This cavern is the significant one of about 6 of caverns and numerous sinkholes in the space sitting on limestone bedrock warped swamp is obtained by various springs that have gradually broken down away the mineral bedrock shaping this cavern north of millennia. It likely could be considered a cavern framework as opposed to only one single cavern with its many equals and associating entries adding up to 1,200 feet. This is the longest known cave in New Pullover from the principal entry of cavern number 2 at the southeast finish of the edge. It is firmly exhorted that arriving at the little 5-foot-high edge ought to just be endeavored by the people who are exceptionally slender. This side section requires a lot crushing mindfulness, is prompted in the 5-foot-high room due to the shaky and possibly hazardous roof. Past this room contacting hands with somebody coming from the subsequent entry is a conceivable, yet, truth be told, tiny cavers can overcome. Because of the accompanying story, the New Pullover Cave Center and Support introduced uniquely crafted lockable security entryways. Guests who wish to investigate the warped marsh cave should initially contact the New Shirt studio to set up for a directed visit. Donald Weltner grew up needing to accomplish something beneficial on the planet, so it didn't shock his family when he applied to the State Officer Foundation to turn into another Shirt State Officer. He graduated, which was a huge achievement for him. He made a few in number kinships with his individual state officers, and after Donald was gotten comfortable with his new profession, he chose to begin a family. He got hitched and had various kids. When he was not investing energy with his family, he would spend time with his state officer companions. One of his kindred state officers acquainted Donald with cave investigating. He became fixated on finding new caverns and delineating them. It reached a place that Donald would go out with his companions and forget about time, which would make his loved ones become extremely worried about his whereabouts. No one knew where he was. Some of the time Donald was dependably the pioneer when he'd go investigating with his buckling companions and would be the first to enter the cavern. Accordingly, he would habitually wind up in hazardous parts that a great many people could never insight at the time. A few caverns in New Shirt were unmapped. These are the caverns that Donald was drawn to. The most unmapped caverns can be risky spots due to falling rocks, flooding of segments, and outrageous weariness. One of the more uncommon perils is getting stuck. Donald never known about somebody stalling out in a cavern, so that was something that never occurred to him. Once Donald's 2 children, Christopher and Roger, became older, he would bring them along on his buckling undertakings. Donald needed to assist with sharing his affection for the outside to whatever number individuals as could reasonably be expected, which eventually propelled him to turn into a boy trooper scout ace. This way he could pass on out gatherings to investigate his most enthusiastic thing in life, caves. He turned into the head of the Grindstone Municipality Company, 116. The scouts in this company turned upward to Donald. Some believed him to be the mentor that they didn't have in their own life. The scouts and Donald's troop cherished continuing spelunking trips since he was so enthusiastic, and the energy that he emitted was all infectious. His children, Christopher and Roger, immediately became progressed cavers at 12 years old and 14. At last, after many buckling trips with his troop, Donald felt they were all set on the less visited and most progressive cavern in New Pullover called Warped Swamp Cave. His troop had mentioned to go there oftentimes previously, yet Donald realized that it would be exceptionally trying for themselves, and consistently moved in an opposite direction from arranging an excursion. There it was, only after a companion of Donald's let him know how simple it was for his children to explore the exciting bends in the road of the cavern, that Donald felt the time had come for he to lead his troop there. The troop was advised that their desire to investigate the Screwy Marsh Cavern would work out. The next week they would at last go on their excursion to the cavern that they've been expecting for such a long time. At 2 p.m. on Saturday, walk 27 Donald and the 12 scouts, including his two children, Christopher and Roger, entered cave number 2 in the slanted cavern swamp framework. The cavern opening was just 16 inches high and 28 inches wide. Expecting them to creep on all fours to get inside, you would presumably miss it in the event that you didn't know where the cavern was. It was a joke among local people that assuming that there was ever an outrageous occasion occurring on the planet, this cavern would be a protected spot to stow away on the grounds that it was such a long ways off the lattice. There are a great deal of branch-offs in this cavern, yet for this excursion, they were completely untouchable. The scouts were told to remain together and utilize a pile framework in the event anything turned out badly. The scouts were a lot more modest than Donald, so he was not stressed over them stalling out. However, there are numerous different dangers that may as yet cause them hurt. Their walls were cold and wet, with an ooze layer in certain areas. Bat droppings lined the cavern floor, and the smell was impactful, however not frightful. At the time, it was hypothesized that this cavern may be associated with 2 different caverns in the warped marsh framework, yet it still couldn't seem not set in stone to make this association. You should go through a little room at the rear of the cavern without telling anybody. Donald remained curious as to whether these caverns were associated, and he previously concluded that he needed to go to that little room that he heard such a great amount about, yet he's never been to. Past endeavors bombed as his companions had for a long time. Truly needed to turn around prior to arriving at the room. He was with the scouts for some time, however at last severed to do his own investigating. Once there was not any more grown-up oversight, a portion of the scouts began to go into the taboo branch-offs of the cavern. They had likewise caught wind of the room toward the back and needed to check whether the caverns associated the scouts were little and quick, permitting them to take care of the cavern. They would ultimately converge with different individuals from the troop by means of the little paths. Right now, the scouts were dispersed all through the cavern, and it was getting more earnestly for Donald to remain and control what is going on. There were 12 of them, and only one of Donald, so he concluded the time had come to end the investigation on the grounds that the children were not keeping his guidelines, and he thought things were beginning to become perilous anyway. Another thing Donald needed to do, prior to finishing the excursion, was make as he would prefer to that little room. Toward the rear of the cavern, he advanced toward an unfamiliar section and felt a flood of energy moved through him. Maybe he was a youngster once more, and he began to become thrilled with the sensation of investigating another piece of the cavern that he has never seen before. He wasn't focusing on the way that the cavern was getting smaller and smaller. This was not an issue for the scouts since they were so little. However, Donald was a lot bigger than them, and the further he got into the cavern, the more he needed to reshape his body to traverse the sections. His garments were totally shrouded in sludge, and there are tears in his garments because of the multitude of difficult situations that he was constraining his body through. By and by, he was on a characteristic conceal, felt invulnerable right now. He had one thing at the forefront of his thoughts: to come to that little room. The entries were getting incredibly restricted now. Was unable to walk any longer, so he began to slither headfirst through a part of the cavern that limited into a cone-like section. He was around 75 feet into the tight entry when unexpectedly he began sliding and fell straight into this exceptionally close hole. This was not no joking matter, at first on the grounds that Donald could simply squirm out very much like he generally had and back up to the less confined region. However, he before long acknowledged there was a significant issue. His shoulders and hips were stuck and his head was gotten at a 30-degree descending point. He had a go at squirming, yet nothing happened. He attempted once more and felt the hold of the section get more tight around him. It was more enthusiastically to slowly inhale. He before long understood that he removed a stone, and it went about as a cornerstone or a wedge, and when he attempted to move back, it fixed. When he attempted to push ahead, it slackened. As Donald wriggled to free himself, the unstuck stone would move a couple inches, and afterwards stop itself against the entry's wall, making him more stuck. His heart was beginning to pulsate quicker as a result of the adrenaline, and in light of the fact that he was in a descending point, his heart needed to work harder to siphon blood all through his body. Donald now figured the main way he could get out is find support from another person. He had a go at hollering for help, yet nobody was close to him to hear his cries. It is hazy the way in which long it took, yet ultimately one of the scouts heard him shouting and found his direction down to Donald, and quickly headed to get his children Christopher and Roger so they could help their father. At long last, Roger and Christopher made it over to their father and promptly began attempting to haul him out. They spent the following 90 minutes attempting to get at him and get his legs free. As of now, several scouts were likewise attempting to help them, yet nothing was working after the entirety of their endeavors. Fizzled Roger made an arrangement to tell the troop that Donald was stuck and they required salvage to get him out of the cavern. Christopher passed on the cavern to caution specialists that his father was stuck and required help promptly. The scouts left the cavern without any issues, and afterward, the trepidation set in that their chief was trapped in a risky situation in the cavern. His body was under tremendous cardiovascular pressure, since he was stuck at that descending point. When the human body is stuck at a descending plot for significant stretches, the heart should stay at work. Past 40 hours consistently, he was in this position. Things were deteriorating. Various salvage bunches showed up, some of which came from extensive distances. Beginning endeavors to pull Donald out by his feet were fruitless. Later, experienced spelunkers endeavored to contact him from different segments of the cavern, yet they could get to inside 2 feet of his head. The heroes couldn't really accept that how he stalled out in such a difficult position. Another component harming his endurance was the 57-degree temperature in the cavern's profundities and the salvage laborers' powerlessness to arrive at his head to give him warm liquids or other sustenance. Donald was in a ton of torment at this, since he was pushed on his side, and each breath he required a consistent exertion. He was beginning to figure he could, at absolutely no point, ever get out to see his family in the future. It was disagreeable to believe that he didn't pay attention to his own buckling rules and set himself in a risky position, despite the fact that he taught well-being to his scout troop from Saturday until Sunday night. More master cavers utilizing drills, etches, and snags slithered into the doorways of the way where Donald was stuck. Sadly, they might in any case, as it were, arrive at his feet. They attempted various systems to haul him out of the position. However, it appeared as though nothing was working. Donald was groaning, and you could perceive he was turning out to be less clear constantly. More drastic actions should have been removed to get Donald from the cavern. In the following period of salvage endeavors, a 16-foot 8-inch shaft was bored upward into the cavern on Sunday evening. Heroes spent until 6 p.m. Monday penetrating an entry sideways from the lower part of the shaft 11 feet through the bedrock close to Donald's head. After that, they connected a bridle and rope to Donald's feet and afterward attempted to haul him out of the wedge stones with a pulley framework. Now, with this large number of additional endeavors, Donald was beginning to imagine that, notwithstanding his foul play, he would survive this cavern. He had been in more regrettable spots in his day-to-day existence, and this was simply one more case of something horrendous happening to him, and he would receive himself in return. Donald had stayed lucid, conversing with salvage laborers, and even went similar to requesting that they let his significant other know that he would be late getting back during the salvage endeavors. From the fisher slices were incurred to Donald's head and his back, and a portion of his ribs were broken. He lost a lot of blood from rocks hitting him and cutting him. At one point, a stone broke free and hit him in the head, leaving a huge cut. Furthermore, the surveying made a sharp stone cut his side. The salvage group had a go at everything, except nothing was working. Donald was not doing so great, and the specialists assessed that Donald would kick the bucket from hypothermia or blood misfortune. Drawn-out openness to the virus walls of the cavern produced disjointedness at first, Then shock after Donald's internal heat level dropped from an ordinary 98.6 degrees to under 80 degrees. State Officer Pagano and others had become critical about Donald's possibilities of endurance. As a medical caretaker, slithered through a 75-foot way in the cavern Sunday morning and found no fundamental indications of something going on under the surface. At beat focuses in Donald's feet and legs. By Monday night, they were simply ready to pull him around 12 creeps out of the hole. They heard snorts from him at 2 a.m. Sunday, yet Monday morning, Pagano said that they had no fundamental signs, regardless of an enormous salvage activity and Donald battling for his life. He was formally articulated dead 20 minutes before the salvage group hauled his body out. They were at last ready to get him out by destruction of the slope of the cavern, removing the slope of bedrock around the cavern with excavators. An explosive. This prompted the recovery of his body. Thanks